I will always remember traffic was terrible the day I was late for work, and my supervisor had previously warned me that being late any longer could result in my losing my job. Without even eating breakfast, I hurried out of the home in search of a cab. After multiple unsuccessful tries, a car eventually pulled over, and the driver smiled warmly and said, "Please, go to the center building. If you can go as quickly as possible, I'd be very grateful." I quickly responded, and as he nodded and drove off, I watched him via the rearview mirror. He had brown eyes that exuded an unexpected tranquility and dark, slightly disheveled hair. "Diego is my name," he said. "Looks like you're having a rough day." His voice was calm and gentle, and for some reason, I felt comfortable putting my trust in him. "My name is Laura," I replied. "Yes, I'll probably get fired if I'm late today." Diego gave a sympathetic nod, saying, "Don't worry, Laura. During the trip, our talk flowed effortlessly, and I guarantee that we'll arrive on time." Diego was able to divert my attention from my concerns by telling me that he had enjoyed working as a cab driver for a few years because it gave him the opportunity to interact with a variety of people. I told him about my demanding work at an advertising agency, and when we got there, I sighed with relief that I still had a few minutes to spare. "Thank you so much, Diego. You saved my day," I said, gratefully, reaching for cash in my purse. "It was a pleasure, Laura." He responded with a smile that made my heart skip a beat, and without giving it much thought, I leaned over and gave him a quick peck on the cheek. Moment it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Diego looked surprised, but he didn't seem uncomfortable. "Have a great day," I said hurriedly, leaving the taxi and running into the office for the rest of the day. I couldn't get Diego out of my mind. His smile, his voice, the way he made me feel, it was absurd considering that I had been married for years to Alejandro, my longtime boyfriend. Our relationship was stable, though things hadn't been going well lately, something I was reluctant to admit. The next few days passed normally, but every time I saw a taxi on the street, I couldn't help but look for Diego's face. A week later, driven by impulse, I called the taxi company pretending I had forgotten something in the car, just to try to find him. To my surprise and delight, I got his number. That very afternoon, with my heart racing, I sent him a message. "Hi Diego, this is Laura, the girl you drove to the center building last week. I was wondering if you like to grab a coffee." Sometime his reply came almost instantly. "Hi Laura, of course I remember you. I'd love to have coffee. How about tomorrow afternoon? We met at a cafe near his work." When I arrived, Diego was already there with that familiar smile. We talked for hours, as if we had known each other for a long time. He told me about his passion for photography and his dream of traveling the world, capturing unique moments. I told him about my long-standing passion for painting, which I had put aside after being married. From that point on, we began seeing one another frequently, always pretending to be going out for coffee or taking a stroll in the park, and my feelings for him were deeper with every interaction. Diego was fun, attentive, and made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. One day, while we were walking through the park, the tension between us became unbearable. Our eyes met, and without saying a word, we kissed. It was intense, filled with all the desire we had been holding back, and when we finally pulled away, we both knew we had crossed a line from which we couldn't return. Even though I didn't really regret it, I whispered, "This is wrong." Our meetings became more frequent. One afternoon, Alejandro picked me up as usual, but instead of driving to our usual location, he took me to his flat. It was a small but comfortable space filled with pictures he had taken. He said, with a shy smile that I found endearing, "I want you to see my little corner of the world." That night, we made love in bed for the first time, and it was intensely passionate and unlike anything I had ever experienced. After lying in his arms, I realized I was falling deeply in love with him. I didn't give it much thought when I woke up feeling queasy one morning, but as the symptoms persisted for a few days, I began to suspect something. I took a pregnancy test, and the results were positive. I had not been intimate with Alejandro for weeks, so it was practically a given that Diego was the father when I realized whose kid it was. It hit me hard. I was pregnant by the man I was having an affair with. I spent days debating whether to tell Alejandro, Diego, or to flee and start over somewhere new. Eventually, I decided I had to be honest because I couldn't continue to live a lie. No matter how painful it was, Alejandro deserved to know the truth. One night, after waiting for Alejandro to calm down, I asked to speak with him and, with a heavy heart, I told him everything I knew about Diego, how we first met, how I fell in love, and then I revealed that I was pregnant and that the unborn child was probably not his. After a lengthy period of silence, Alejandro eventually said in a voice full of sadness, "Why, Laura?" His remarks crushed my heart. It wasn't you, Alejandro, but me. What did I do wrong? Somewhere in our marriage, I lost myself, and I didn't know how to get back on track. We talked for hours, we cried, we argued, and we held each other until we came to the painful conclusion that our marriage was over. Alejandro asked for some time to process everything before deciding what to do next, and I felt that I was finally being honest. The following day, I called Diego and asked him to meet me at our usual cafe. When I got there, he was there, but his smile vanished as soon as he saw how serious I was. "What's wrong, Laura?" he asked, worried. I took a deep breath, and then I broke the news to him. "I'm pregnant, Diego, and the baby is yours." His face changed several times in a matter of seconds, and then for a moment, he looked surprised and afraid, and finally, "Wow," he said, still in shock. I gave Alejandro the rundown on our chat and our choice to part ways. When I finished, Diego listened softly while holding my hand and asked, "What do you want to do?" "I don't know," I confessed, "but I know I want you, Diego, and I want to try to create something with you if you feel the same way." Diego grinned and gave me a gentle kiss. "Of course, I want that, Laura. I want you, and I want this child." The months that followed were difficult. Alejandro's divorce was agonizing, but we were able to maintain our good relations. I felt like I had finally found my way when Diego and I moved in together, decorated the baby's room, chose names, and made plans for the future. However, as the due date drew near, I noticed that Diego was becoming more aloof and spending more time away from home. Whenever I asked him why, he always gave an excuse like extra work, a friend in need of assistance, or a family emergency. My heart fell when Diego arrived home late one night when I was about to give birth. His hair was untidy and he smelt like women's perfume. "Where have you been?" Diego avoided my gaze as I inquired, already knowing the answer. "I apologize, Laura, but there is another person." His remarks came as a shock to me. After everything we had gone through together and the fact that I had left my previous life for him, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Diego was unfaithful to me. Diego was trying to betray me while crying, so I asked him who she was. He said that her name was Carla. Even though I was having trouble speaking, I said, go away, and don't come back," in a shaky voice. Diego attempted to argue, but I shouted at him to stop. Leave that night as I sobbed by myself in the bed we used to share, feeling the baby move inside of me. I put my hand on my belly and, through tears, whispered, "I promise that I'll love you enough for the two of us." The days that followed were filled with regret and sadness. I felt as though the universe was mocking me because I had left my husband, risking everything for a love I believed to be real only to discover it was only an illusion. Even after everything I had done to him, Alejandro was unexpectedly understanding when I told him what had happened. One day, when I least expected it, he even volunteered to help with the baby if I needed it. When Carla knocked on my door, my immediate reaction was to smash it in her face, but for some reason, whether it was curiosity or some kind of self-harm, I held back. She sat on the couch, clearly uncomfortable, and started talking. "I'm very sorry, Laura. When we first started dating, Diego told me he was single." Her remarks hurt me. Diego had not only misled me, but he had also lied to her. I chuckled angrily and responded that it seems we were both duped by him. Carla, who was crying, nodded in agreement. When I learned the truth, I broke up with him right away, but I thought that I should have given you an explanation and an apology. For a while, we sat in silence. "Thank you for coming," I murmured, feeling a strange sense of closure. Two women united by the betrayal of a guy we both believed we loved. "It wasn't your fault." Carla left me with a sense of closure, and all of my anger towards her had subsided. Now, I was angry at Diego and myself for being so gullible. 2 weeks later, I went through a long, painful labor, but when I finally held my daughter in my arms, all of the pain from the previous months seemed to vanish. She was perfect, with dark hair and brown eyes just like her father. I chose to name her Hope because, to me, she represented the promise of a fresh start and a better future. As I held her in the hospital room, I reflected on everything that had brought me to that position. I had made many mistakes, hurt people who loved me, and in return I had been hurt too. But looking at my daughter Hope, I realized that it had all been worth it. If the journey brought me to her, the first few months with her were exhausting, but full of wonderful moments. Every smile, every little milestone was a source of immeasurable joy. I fully immersed myself in motherhood, leaving the pain of the past behind. Diego tried to contact me several times after Hope was born. He said he wanted to meet his daughter, but I wasn't ready to let him back into our lives. The pain of his betrayal was still too fresh. On the other hand, Alejandro became an unexpected support. Despite everything that had happened between us, he offered to help whenever I needed it, and his generosity touched my heart deeply, making me realize how much I had underestimated him during our marriage. As Hope grew, so did I. I learned to forgive myself for the mistakes of the past and to understand that love can take many different forms. Sometimes second chances come from the most unexpected places. When Hope was a little older, I got an unexpected call from Diego one day. His voice was full of emotion, and he asked to meet his daughter. I understood if you didn't want to, but I had to try, he said. I hesitated for a second. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep Diego away forever. But when he met us and saw Hope, his eyes were full of tears, and he whispered with a mixture of tenderness and regret. I let him hold our daughter, and as I watched him with her in his arms, I caught a glimpse of the man I had once fallen in love with. For a moment, he wasn't a full-time father like I had imagined, but he made an effort to be there for Hope's important moments. Over time, I learned to forgive him, not for himself, but also for our daughter. On the other hand, Alejandro never changed. His friendship became one of the things that kept me going, and he gradually assisted me. I began painting again in an attempt to rediscover aspects of myself that I had lost along the way. I discovered that love can change, and that second chances can arise from the most unlikely places. As I watched Hope play with Alejandro in the park one day, I realized that I had finally found the happiness I had been looking for. It wasn't what I had imagined, but it was real, and most importantly, it was mine. I thought back on the path that had led me to that point. My relationship with Alejandro developed gradually. It wasn't the intense passion I had felt for Diego, but rather a deeper love based on mutual respect and understanding. Diego's meeting and the tumultuous connection. As the sun set, I realized that my story of love, betrayal, and redemption had come to an end, but that a new story full of possibilities and promises was just beginning. This time, I was ready to live it with my eyes open and my heart full of gratitude for the lessons learned and for the love I had found in the most unexpected places. The betrayal, the birth of hope, and the gradual but steady reconciliation with Alejandro had led me to this point. As I hugged Hope and Alejandro wrapped his arms around us, I realized that, although my happy ending wasn't what I had imagined, it was definitely the result of my mistakes, struggles, and most importantly, my growth. The hand of hope, since we had learned the most important lesson, that real love endures the storms and blossoms in the calm that follows, I was confident that we would be all right no matter what the future brought.